Okay, then I think we are ready to start. So I would like to welcome everyone to this press briefing, where we will be launching the report Climate Action in Shipping, Progress Towards Shipping's 2030 Breakthrough. This launch is taking place at the annual summit of the Global Maritime Forum in Athens, in the beautiful venue of Niarchos. And we also have participants joining over YouTube, so welcome to you as well. My name is Ingrid Sidenvall-Gigot. I'm a project director in the Global Maritime Forum, where I work, among other things, with the Getting to Zero coalition. The Getting to Zero coalition is an industry-led coalition with more than 200 members from across the maritime value chain, supported by knowledge partners and supporting organizations, and endorsed by a number of governments. And the coalition has as its goal to have commercially viable zero-emission vessels operating on deep seas from 2030 towards full decarbonization by 2050 at the latest. So 2030 is really a key year for the Getting to Zero coalition. And the coalition has also adopted a 5% target, so a 5% uptake of zero-emission fuels by 2030. And this is what we are assessing progress towards. This report that we are launching today has been prepared. It's been written by UMass, Dr. Domagoj Baresic, and working together with Catherine Palmer, who is the shipping lead of the Climate Champions team. This is the second iteration of the report, and the idea is to annually keep tracking the progress that we're making. In this press release, we will first hear some framing from Catherine, and then we'll have a presentation about the key findings of the report by Domagoj. After that, we have an industry panel that will answer some questions and comment on the findings of the report. We will open up for questions from participants here in the room in Athens, but also over YouTube. So you're welcome to type in your questions in YouTube. With that, I will hand over to you, Catherine, so for your opening. Welcome.
Thank you very much. So as Ingrid said, my name is Catherine Palmer. I'm the maritime lead at the Climate Champions team. And we work in support of the agendas of the UN high-level climate change champions for COP27 and COP28. And our role is to drive real-world momentum into the UN climate change negotiations. And we're here today to be able to launch the second of our 2030 Breakthrough Report. And I'd also like to express my thanks to UMass and Getting to Zero Coalition for being partners in this report. And so really what this report does is it identifies action areas and real economy outcomes that are needed by 2030 to drive systemic change. And we have 2030 breakthroughs across 21 different sectors that require this systemic change. And for the shipping industry, that is 5% zero-emission fuel uptake in international shipping by 2030 and 15% uptake in domestic shipping by 2030. And the benefit of the 2030 Breakthroughs framework is it can be used to continuously strengthen that collaboration across the full maritime value chain. And it can also support parties and member states to make transitions faster, less difficult, and more cost efficient. And in July earlier this year, 175 member states at the IMO adopted the revised 2023 greenhouse gas strategy. And that actually included this level of ambition of 5%, and actually it went even further by stretching it and striving to 10%. And so what we see is that is a clear example of the ambition loop that is at work here between state and non-state actors. And this convergence behind this breakthrough goal will enable a critical mass to pursue a cleared shared transformation pathway to a resilient zero-carbon maritime sector. And in just 6 weeks' time, the world will gather in Dubai for COP28, where the first global stocktake will actually take place. And what we can do is we can bring this maritime sector-specific analysis of progress to the policy makers and use key forums like COP and like the one we're here for this week, the Global Maritime Forum Annual Summit, where we can share best practice, share learnings, have solution-based dialogues that will help foster collective problem solving to be able to make faster progress. So how are we doing? So over the last 12 months, I think we've seen significant progress on the policy side, which I've just mentioned, where we've got a raised ambition, we've got a timeline, and this signal from the IMO is quite clearly there that the adoption of zero-emission fuels must rapidly scale. And nationally, we've seen action through countries, more than 30 countries now having hydrogen plans and strategies. We've seen that the current hydrogen project pipeline is more than double that of shipping's needs, but I would stress that that is actually only the pipeline, it's not actual production. And I'd also say that we've seen shipping customers signalling their demand for zero-emission freight services by 2025. So that sounds quite a lot. There's different actors working across the value chain, signaling demand and signaling supply, but is that actually enough? And I think this is where I would say, that we have a few forward-looking companies that are committed to procuring zero-emission vessels. And although this is a demand-side pull, and it is complemented with more commitments for supply-side projects, it's just not enough at scale or at the pace that is needed. And we need to see the demand and supply actors work together to implement specific solutions and take specific actions to be able to accelerate this pace and to give much more confidence to the policymakers that they can take concrete, targeted national action to scale supply, and also to enable them to be confident to turn these IMO ambitions into specific regulatory measures that are going to be adopted in 2 years' time. So although there's a growing appetite for zero carbon freight, we also need to see that turn into concrete demand on the order book for zero-emission vessels, which in turn will send a strong signal to the zero-emission fuel suppliers that we as a sector are ready to transition, and we can provide the certainty to advance these supply projects to final investment decisions. So I think what I've seen is, the adoption of the greenhouse gas strategy is a historic moment that shows that the 5% breakthrough goal can now only be considered as a minimum ambition and one that must be reached through compliance. And in order to keep 1.5 within reach, we do need to focus on striving towards the 10%. And so what I'd like to do now is hand over to Domagoj, who will take us through the findings of the report in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you for explanation of basically the overall findings of the report and the background of how we came to where we are at the moment. So my name is Domagoj Barisic. I'm a research fellow at University College London and also a consultant at UMass. And together with a team of researchers or consultants, we prepared this report, really tracking progress towards 5% by 2030. Over a multitude of different types of indicators, which we grouped into these thematic 5 change levers, following progress from everything to do with technology, supply, demand, to finance, and to policy as well. And through this process, we've seen a lot of changes happening in the past 12 months from the past iteration of this report. So we've seen a lot of positive progress being made, but also some interesting challenges. So a bit of background, the report is based on ideas from socio-technical transitions and from this S-curve adoption rate, understanding that a fuel transition will have a rapid adoption phase, and that's something that we're hoping to see or seeing early developments of within shipping as well. So overall, we think we're partially on track at the moment, but looking into specific areas, for example, technology and supply, which is the first of the 5 change levers that we'll go over, we are also partially on track. So we can see some positive developments or some positive reason for hope when we look at the growth in cross-industry collaborations, the growth in pilot and demonstration projects that we've seen over the past year, which we really use as a proxy to understand how much stakeholder interaction or industry interaction with the research is taking place and can indirectly influence the development of supply within the industry as well. When we actually look into the area of supply of scalable zero-emission fuels by 2030, this is the 0.6 exajoule figure when we look at it in terms of energy and energy supply versus demand, we have some reason for hope and optimism that this figure could be potentially reached. Now, the reason for that is that if we look at current ammonia production announcements in the pipeline, they represent around 4.3 exajoules. In terms of methanol, we're talking about 0.1 exajoules. So there's a significant amount of potential projects in the pipeline that are announced that could reach this. I have to caveat that with the fact that it really depends whether these projects will be constructed or not, developed, and then secondly, how much of this supply will actually go towards maritime. But there is cause for some reason for hope there and optimism. Now, if we move to demand, which is the second one of the levers that we've looked at, we're not on track. And this is the one lever that has changed from last year. Last year, we said we were partially on track. And I have to emphasize this point, that this change does not say that progress has been reversed from last year, but simply that along the S-curve trajectory, currently we are not making progress at the rate we would need to be making to be where we have to be in 2025, and then to be where we have to be in 2030. That is the 0.6 exajoule demand now, so demand equating to the supply. And the reason for this is that when we actually look at the order book and extrapolate how this order book will develop in the next few years, we seem to say that by 2025, we would be at around 30 to 50% of the demand we would hope to be at. And this is not sufficient to meet that demand. But the picture is not completely pessimistic from that perspective, that it should be said that we're talking about an S-curve adoption rate, so that a sudden acceleration in fleet zero-emission fuel compatibility or increase in order books could be achieved both through new buildings, but also through retrofitting of the existing fleets. And in other areas, we have seen, as Catherine mentioned, commitments to zero-emission freight. We've seen more and more ship owners being aligned to net zero or zero goals. We see SBTI developments taking place, Zemba, for example, all of these interesting developments taking place. In terms of finance, if we go to the third lever we developed, progress has continued from last year that we're partially on track. Now, we covered a multitude of different indicators. The main ones that I would say here is understanding how has alignment to Poseidon principles changed and trajectories over the past year. And we can see that sustainability-linked loans and bonds issued to ship owners or related sectors have remained stable, showing continued appetite for lenders to support the industry. Also, from the perspective of transparency of the Poseidon principle trajectories, extent of transparency and this depth have both improved as well. With regards to public finance, we have seen an increase in the amount of public finance available. We estimate that figure at around 7.7 billion of the overall amount of money or a pot of money that's available for funding of zero-emission ship projects. Having said that, most of that funding is not specifically earmarked for shipping scalable zero-emission fuels, but overall maritime decarbonization. But the main issue here is that a lot of this funding, or most of it, is from the global north, so the EU and the US. And this is an issue because we need funding for this transition to be truly global and affect the global south. Now, in terms of policy, I'll not dwell too long on that because Catherine has made a really good point about that. But what's happened is the IMO initial strategy was revised, and in MARPOL, discussions are taking place. But at MEPC 80, we really had the revision of that strategy taking us to the 2023 GHG strategy. So the 2023 strategy has set some ambitious goals. And these goals, or these levels of ambitions, 5 to 10% emission fuels by zero or near zero fuels by 2030, indicative checkpoints in 2030 and 2040, almost full decarbonization by 2050, basically effectively say that this transition has to happen now, that everyone has to buy into it for it actually to take place the way we want it to take. And on a national level or on a more pluricentric level, we've also seen developments in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, in the European Union with the EU ETS developments and funding of the issue. So finally, we come to the issue of civil society, which is the final lever that I would like to go into. And when it comes to civil society, trying to understand non-state actors, beyond shipping governments or industry, we have seen more developments in terms of NGOs being involved in debates. We have seen more diverse voices debating at the IMO during MEPC and associated debates such as IWG on more talk, calls for action. We have seen small island developing nations, states, developing countries, least developed countries, raising up their voices to actually say that this transition is affecting them and how it's affecting them and how they want to see it being resolved. However, what we have seen in civil society, although positive, we still have to see more in terms of representation from organizations from the Global South and more diverse voices, because at the moment, as we heard yesterday, the GMF development, this is not going the way we would hope to be developing. So in summary, what we can say is there's a lot of cause for optimism over the past year. A lot of new developments have taken place, but now is the call to actually go into that level of actually creating that action that we need, to actually commit in terms of policy owners, in terms of industry, in terms of the wide group of stakeholders, to actually make those actions into concrete provisions that we want to see. And this reminds me, just to conclude, a few days ago I was in Corinth, and Corinth is also obviously known for the Corinth Canal, which we who work in the maritime industry one way or another know about, but it's also prides itself of being the home of the mythical winged Pegasus, of the mythical beast Pegasus. And an interesting snippet I heard or I learned about is that Bellerophon, the mythical hero of Greece, rode Pegasus to actually defeat the fire-breathing monster Chimera. Now, I don't think HFOs are monsters necessarily, but they are fire-breathing. And let's ride the hopes and the developments that we saw in the revised strategy or the 2023 GAG strategy as industry, as policymakers, as stakeholders to actually defeat the monster of decarbonization and actually come where we have to be by 2030 and beyond. Thank you.
Excellent, Domago. Thank you so much and for leaving us with that image. That's really helpful. So now we are very fortunate to have an excellent industry panel here to provide some comments. So first I would like to introduce Michael Maliaros. Is that all right?
That's very correct.
Okay, good, perfect. So General Manager with Euronav, so representing a ship owner's perspective. And we heard here from Domago's presentation that the orders of vessels are not currently on track. So would be really curious to hear your thoughts about these findings.
Sure. I would like to comment Domago, very interesting indeed, and thank you for giving us all this information. For shipping industry, decarbonization is not only the final product to build, a vessel that is actually able to burn green fuels. For us, it started with a shock many years ago. Now it's becoming an attitude. It's becoming a way of living, a way of working, but not only working, a way of living. And this is quite important because it transforms the entire mindset of the people working in the industry. And this is the first step for me to see the transformation and to see changing all the value chain across the shipping. We started focusing on the operational efficiency, which is quick gains, what we can do right now to minimize the consumption so we can emit less. And starting from this, indeed, we managed to build the tools, even in-house, to digitalize, to make our processes more efficient, and then we move to the next phase, which is actually to go to pilot projects on technologies that they are available or they are emerging through this. And finally, yes, on our order book, there are only ready vessels, only. And now we will start accelerating, indeed. I think we prepared, a very healthy framework, and then the right moment we will be able to accelerate our efforts and decarbonize. I think it's fair to say that although it's really ambitious, the targets, and from 5 we move to 10, yet I strongly believe that the shipping industry we will be able to catch up with this. A big question mark for us is indeed the supply of the green fuels, and there we have no control, but on the entire processes that we can influence and we can have a control, for sure we are going to comply with it and be on the front line.
Okay, thank you so much, Michel, and very good to hear that positive note towards the end, and I think you made the perfect segue to the fuel supply. So we're very fortunate to have Vinit Mittal with us, chairman of the Avada Group. Obviously, the demand for the new fuels is going to be huge going forward, but we also heard from Domagoj that even also in this lever, we're not currently quite on track. So what are your thoughts about that?
Thank you, GMF, for launching this pivotal report. It gives a very comprehensive picture, like Catherine and Doc was saying, on opportunities as well as challenge. So the good news is that 30 countries have announced their roadmap for the hydrogen, and they have green hydrogen projects actively being pursued. In India alone, we are targeting to make 5 million ton green hydrogen, which is almost 30 odd million ton ammonia or methanol equivalent before 2030. And various projects have already started. We did our financial closure of 500,000 ton green ammonia project last week. So there is a lot of actions are happening across the world in this space. Due to net zero commitment from the banks, we are seeing increased traction to support such project. The pricing is still an issue. And the key is actually that the ship owner should start locking the contract for green methanol, green ammonia supply. That is what is lacking. There are many players who have started construction using non-recourse or recourse financing as well, and those molecules will not stay in the market for long. So the key is that serious players should go out to good players who have received FID, who have equity, who have land, and who are on verge of contracting the EPC contract, etc., to reach out to them and do a long-term offtake contract. And I was having a conversation earlier this morning with 2 of the ship owners, and they were trying to convince me that sell me the methanol at HFO, which is 670 today or 675, he said, plus 1.7 ETS, which is 100 euro if you keep, 170 and plus $100 premium. So I think one of the fear I have is that every report keeps saying that hydrogen should be done at $1.5 to $2 goal from 2025. That is not right. Let industry become mature, people make some money, and bankers become comfortable that it's a bankable project. If we start squeezing everything, then there are chances of failure from the beginning, and the whole decarbonization story would not succeed. So the key is at a reasonable price, which is a win-win for both ship operator, end consumer, and green ammonia, green methanol producer. We should be signing long-term contract. And the second issue is the definition of green methanol and green ammonia is still hazy. So there are people who are saying 2 kg per kg of hydrogen, 2 kg of CO2. The one country is saying 3.5 kg like Japan. So there has to be a consistent uniform definition. And same thing actually for methanol. Some of the European buyers are very ambitious. They are saying do biogenics from day one. So if you have to do like, if you have 30,000 ship and 0.25, say 25,000 tons per ship requirement a year, you are looking at a huge quantity. Where are you going to get so much of biomass? So I think people have to be pragmatic and start having a clear definition that as long as hydrogen is coming from the renewable sources and carbon can be taken from the flue output of any chimney from cement industry, power plant, say sugar plant or whatever, then they should be welcoming that. There is a policy constraint where it says it will be acceptable till 2041, not after that. So when you are building these projects, you are pricing the green methanol cheaper today because you are looking at amortizing the cost at 30 years, 40 years. So your policies have to look at the reality of life, look at what technology is scalable, what is most easily available technology, and then scale it up. Not put any stringent norm from today, which is practically difficult to scale up, and then these targets will remain a dream and not turn into the reality. So I think to sum up my thought, I think the opportunity is huge. There are enough players to produce these green fuels competitively. The key is to have the real definition of what will be treated green or e-methanol or green ammonia, etc., and have a consistent definition worldwide and be willing to pay some premium, not like 3 times which was told yesterday in open house and in the opening remarks. I think it's not needed, but giving 15 to 20% premium over grey plus ETS price is normal to kick off this industry.
Okay, thank you so much, Vineet. We will now hear from Michael Parker, who is the chairman of the Poseidon Principles. So the Poseidon Principles were referred to in the presentation, and the finance lever was looking a little bit better than the others. It was partially on track. So what are your thoughts about this, Michael?
So I'd like to pick up on Vineet's word hazy, because I think it's a good description, and also the importance of what the IMO have just done, because I think what they have done is make us all believe there is a straight road towards the objectives, whether it is the minimum or the striving objective, certainly for 2030 and beyond. I'm going to look at this in 3 ways. One is as the Poseidon Principles and why that's important. Second, the point Domagoj made during his presentation around cross-sector collaboration. And then thirdly, around, I think, green corridors, because I think that will be a way in which some of this comes together. So on the Poseidon Principles, as well as the Sea Cargo Charter, the other initiatives around transparency. So the transparency means that finance and insurance in their context are being transparent about the emissions in our portfolios. And we have adopted in the Poseidon Principles for banks the IMO raised ambition. So the report we will have at the end of this year will show our alignment as 30 institutions. They were now 34 since 3 Japanese banks and a major Italian financial institution joined. We will show our portfolios against the previous IMO ambition of the 50% from 2008 and against both the striving and minimum objectives on a well-to-weight GHG basis. That transparency in public puts us under pressure because we will show how far away our portfolios are from the reality of the IMO's new ambition. However, many of us in these groups, particularly the banking group, have got 1.5 commitments, net zero commitments by 2050, and very public commitments by our institutions with large commitments to sustainable finance. In Citi's case, $1 trillion of either finance or range finance by 2030. So the transparency is building the incentives to find the things to finance, not at the expense of retrofitting the existing fleet, but with the existing fleet to finance the new fuels, the new ships that emerge. And the haziness, of course, as Vineet has explained, is around 2 things. One is, where's the fuel going to go? And secondly, what are the right fuels? And of course, the ship owners deciding what ships they wish to order has to come first before they come to us to finance them. But I think one of the other things that we also need to look at, and goes to the cross-sector issue, is a lot of these projects involve companies in the energy sector, the new energy sector, as well as shipping, but also importantly, cargo owners. And this is the big shift that has happened in a way that puts the shipping industry in a very different light for many people post-COVID, which is not just the security of supply chains, but is the environmental impact of supply chains and the Scope 3 emissions. The allocation of capital, whether it is in banks or through private capital through the bond market, it needs the transparency so it can invest in the right things. But it also doesn't necessarily know where some of the fuel is going to go. So we have to look at this much more broadly, not just within the shipping industry. So the demand for those fuels, which a lot of people think will be difficult for shipping to get, I'm much more optimistic because a lot of that demand will be driven by the cargo owner. And that, I think, will help the ship owners. And that brings me to green corridors. Green corridors, I think, will be the way in which we will see a more coordinated way of building in the long-term contracts that Vineet is looking for, the commitments both by cargo through the COSEV Alliance, the Zemba initiative, and also I think, particularly being led by the container sector, I think we'll see a consistent approach being taken around this by the main shipping lines. And we've seen through the initiatives from some of the ports, Singapore, Rotterdam is a good example, where this is not just about the ship, it's also about the availability of these new fuels in the ports, it's about the infrastructure. And so what is therefore being financed is very different from what used to be financed. And so shipping finance is not going to be the same as it used to be because it's now going to be much more environmentally focused around the emissions, not just of the ship, but the emissions being created in the supply chain the ship operates in. I don't think there's any question about whether the money will be there. It will be there. I think there is an issue with financial regulators that the safety and financial sustainability of the system is clearly important, and there's been a lot of focus on that by regulators. Shipping is still a dirty word in some quarters with regulators because of the huge losses incurred 10, 12 years ago. But climate risk is now uppermost in regulators' mind after financial sustainability, and we're beginning to see the frameworks be created. And I think shipping comes well out of that when regulators look at the integrated way shipping plays in these supply chains and the importance of that to the cargo owners, that actually the view of shipping will change because its role in the global economy will become as apparent then as it is to us in the industry as it was during COVID. So I'm very optimistic that a lot of these parallel initiatives will now begin to converge down the pathway the IMO has set and give us, as financiers and as ship owners and as fuel providers, a much clearer picture of where we can work together to finance the projects that need to happen that will enable us to get somewhere between the 5 and 10% by 2030. Now, I'm afraid I didn't look up Poseidon before we launched the Poseidon Principles, so I have no Greek mythology to talk about other than to say when I did look it up afterwards, I discovered he was in fact a very nasty god, so we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So now we'll open up for questions. We have a few questions that have come in over YouTube, but I wanted to give you a chance in the room first. You have a microphone. Yes. Okay. So,
which one first?
You want to go with? Hi, I'm Costas Paris from the Wall Street Journal. I've been covering shipping for the past 13 years. Richard here has been doing it for a longer time. And for the old-timers, we see the ship decarbonization as an issue which is something like analysis to paralysis. If you had an average person here that doesn't know this, that you're trying to convince that his couch is going to cost another $30 because it will be shipped on sustainable fuel, you have to convince him that this is the right thing and there's a time frame. So let me try to ask some specific questions. Is there any consensus on what is going to be the green fuel of the future from where it stands now. Maersk, a pioneer over the years in the shipping industry, has ordered a number of methanol ships, and others have followed. Do you think that the industry is focusing on methanol or on something else? I know that ammonia is big in Japan. This is the one thing. The second thing, is there any numbers for the green corridors? There's a green corridor across the Pacific, Shanghai to Los Angeles and Long Beach. How much cargo in terms of the entire cargo that goes across the Pacific is going to go, how many containers are going to go through this green corridor? Is this real, or is it just for show from Walmart and Target and then some ship owners that say that we are shipping sustainably? That we are shipping sustainably. I'm sorry. Thank you.
It's for the YouTube audience. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you so much. So a question about the future fuel and then green corridors. So maybe, Michel, would you like to take the one on fuels?
Yes. I don't think that it is fair to say to judge methanol or ammonia. For me, we have to examine, as I said, the supply and what is quick wins, what we can use now and what we can be developed in the future. It's not that one solution also fits everyone, because there are different type of vessels, different routes, different sizes. So we have to see what would be the supply, definitely, what will be and from where. Then we can see what are the capacity of the vessels, and then we will decide, let's say, where we are going to invest. For sure, we do anticipate that, and as we can see now, methanol is more easy, let's say, to invest in the short term. And definitely we see also ammonia that it will be definitely the future with hydrogen. So,
if I may, yeah. Would you wait, or would you wait to see, or would you be prompted to take the step like
no, we are ready
to invest in a ship so that the supply
we are already
comes?
We are already taking the steps to do.
Have you ordered any green ships, any methanol ships?
We ordered, yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. This is what I said also.
Okay, thank you. And there was a question about green corridors as well. Is anyone feeling motivated to pick that one up?
I can add a bit on fuel choices. We are seeing customer is ordering both green ammonia, green methanol. And you rightly pointed out, Japanese are more bullish on green ammonia, and they have ordered more ships from green ammonia. But world can have all the green fuels. So it's not going to be one versus another. I think both the fuels will exist and will keep servicing to the ship owner. That's how I see it.
Costas, green corridors don't become green overnight. They're going to start dark or light brown, depending on your perspective. But they will have now a clear pathway that the IMO has set. And that has sent the demand signal that much of the energy sector, not Vineet, obviously, but other members of the energy sector were saying, where are the demand signals? The global regulator has sent a very clear demand signal. The definitions of Scope 3, the accounting definitions of climate risk, all of these things are beginning to fall into place. And the green corridors are the long-haul ones, which are the ones where the most emissions are. There will be a clear pathway set by the ports of Singapore and Rotterdam around their green corridor of what is expected, and of course what the cargo owners moving cargo on that route will accept, if you like, as defining the progress that needs to be made. It does depend upon the fuel being available, as we know from many comments from Maersk from years during COVID. The cost of the individual item is easily affordable by the consumer at the end of it. And the consumer wants this to happen, and so it will happen. And so I think it'll take place over a period. The question is there enough of that to make this target of 10% by 2030 actually come to fruition?
Hello. If we're looking at the major changes between what you were looking at in the report last year versus this year, then obviously the midterm revisions from the IMO is the major shift in terms of what the industry is dealing with. The narrative that we had last year was very much aligned with encouraging the IMO to set more stringent targets, to look at 2030 and 2040 waypoints, and to align 2050 with 1.5. Now, you didn't quite get there, but you didn't get too far off, which has left the industry in a rather embarrassing position that they are now effectively having to do what they didn't think was going to happen. The IMO has caught the industry off guard, I would argue, and they have been left rather exposed in terms of their short-term ability to hit 2030 and 2040 targets. The same people that were arguing last year that we needed to increase and accelerate our ambition are now changing their tune somewhat and saying we are not going to be able to hit 2030 and 2040 targets. They are too fast, too stringent. Do you think that there has been an embarrassing loss of a scapegoat because the IMO has achieved what it said it was going to achieve and caught the industry off guard?
Who would like to take that question?
Sure, it was a rhetorical question.
No, that was very much a real question.
No, but if you combine it with EU mandate, like ETS from the next year, 2024, IMO looks less stringent compared to the EU one. So I think world is realizing more and more that the only way to change the behavior is through taxonomy or with the mandates. And that's what exactly IMO is doing, what's EU is doing through CBAM and ETS on shipping. And I think that's the only way forward. And those people who didn't believe it's happened, it's their loss. And I think people like Musk and my neighbor here who is ordering ammonia and green methanol ships, they will be winners because when you talk to people like Amazon, Walmart, my family supplies to Walmart, they are coming and auditing each and everything you supply to them from SBTi reporting also, and they are making it mandatory that you will be qualified only when you are following their norms. So I think they are not just looking at their emission, but they are looking at their suppliers' emission, and they have built the process along with SBTi to ensure that their targets are met by 2030. So all these behaviors are in the right direction to ensure that green economy develops in marine sector as well.
So we have a few questions that have come in over YouTube. So I think I'd like to take that question because I'm thinking that those of you who are in the room may be able to catch the panelists after we close the YouTube link. So there is a question from Greg Knoller from S&P Global Market, who is asking how much more commitment is required from cargo owners such as the Zemba initiative to help meet the fuel demand supply goals. I don't know, Domagoj, would you like to take that one? And you were also prepared to take the floor to make another comment.
Thank you. I'll start off with this comment. So short answer is we didn't do this. I don't have the specific number on me to tell you X% is required. But what we did do is in the analysis, when we're actually looking at it, we were looking at the commitments at the moment and seeing if we added those commitments to the demand and the order book, would we be on track or partially on track? The answer is we're still not. I could double check those figures that if we have them in the analysis we've done and come back to Greg as well later on. But at the moment, the shorthand version is we're not, and we would need more commitments. The point I wanted to come back to is the previous point about the demand and ship owners and where we are and where we want to be and what happened with the IMO strategy. So I think Michael pointed out quite well before that this is a rapid transition and a lot can change within a short period of time. And even though we're not on track now, that doesn't mean that that will be the case in a year from now. And that kind of ties in well with what the report is tracking. By saying we're not on track now, it doesn't mean it's not feasible to do the transition. It just means that currently that currently the trajectory is not where we would want it to be, and that the trajectory has to be more ambitious. Having said that, that can change rapidly if you see orders increasing within the next few months. It can change, and we can say, give a far more optimistic figure next year. And then the second aspect of it as well ties with this point about ammonia versus methanol, and that's about this balancing act about seeing which fuel is better, which is not, which might offer more short-term solutions to long-term benefits. And here, investing or being ready to invest in ships that have ready notations, but going beyond ready notation, that are truly ready to operate on those fuels, and that are looking at the up-to-date bespoke developments of the technology is quite important, and keep track on from the ship owner perspective, but also from the wider industry perspective.
I just wanted to come in again on Richard's question. I think there is this kind of lag. I mean, if we look at the ambition loop that I kind of call it between non-state actors and state actors, the non-state were really looking for the IMO to put shipping on course for 1.5, and like we said, the levels of ambition really set that out as still within reach, and so now there is this time for, you know, that is a clear signal from the policymakers. Now the market needs to respond with that, like we talk about this demand signal that needs to now come from the shipping industry, because I think it's quite, the course and the trajectory is quite clearly the direction of travel and the pace of travel, because the timeline is there as well as the trajectory is now set out. And so there's no sort of avoiding that or moving away from it. And so there's a case now for us to see more real world action being taken. And like we've, you know, we are seeing a few companies ordering zero emission vessels, but that is not enough in order to be able to achieve the 5% by 2030 where we are today. So we really should be taking the IMO signal, translating that into real world action, and the ship owners sending a clear demand signal to the fuel suppliers, so that these fuel supply projects that are being committed can then be turned into and converted into financial investment decisions, of which then secures the supply for those ordered zero-emission vessels when they arrive and they are delivered. So it's really much about real-world action between the supply and demand actors really coming together to make this happen, because I think the signal is quite clearly there. And the longer we leave that, the harder it is going to be, and the more disruptive it's going to be. So we need to start taking that action now.
Thank you, Catherine. I think that was a perfect closing remark, and we are actually out of time. So I would like to thank all the panelists for being here. Domagoj for the report, very important findings, and I think they will be tremendously helpful to us here at the annual summit of the Global Maritime Forum, and as Catherine pointed out, to the industry as a whole going forward. And thank you, Catherine, as well, for being here and for your remarks. Thank you for all the questions. Apologies for those online. We didn't have time to answer all the questions, but I think many of them were picked up by the panel. So thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.